is everyone doing? Yeah.
The hole.
Feeling, yeah, just about. Okay,
That's
good.
a nice hole.
What an entrance.
I know.
What an entrance.
And the crowd went wild.
Yeah, DevGAMM or anywhere else, alright.
So yeah, we are NotGames. I'm Alex. That's Dennis.
Hello.
And Andy.
Yo.
Yeah, this music is ridiculous. So I am one of the writers and directors and designers of our game, Not for Broadcast.
I'll go next. So I'm Andy. I'm the CEO. I deal with the kind of business side. I also am one of the writers, a bit of game design and localization and post-production.
Hello. Oh, wow. I'm Den, and I deal with all of the video in an FMV game. So I do all the video content and basically the editing and everything else to put into the video game.
So some of you may not know our game. So our talk is how not to make a TV show into a game. So we made a game called Not for Broadcast, which is an immersive TV simulator where you pick the camera angles, you censor the language, all in a totalitarian dystopian state. So it's all about what you broadcast to the public and what's the truth and what isn't.
I don't know about you, Al, but that sounds bloody brilliant, mate. It sounds really good.
It's not a talk about marketing, but very good.
We'll get there, don't we?
So yeah, we're going to quickly just show you a bit of the game so you kind of have some context for what we're talking about. Sorry, Andy, did you have something to say?
I had a little thing, yeah.
Right.
Just before we jump in, because as you've mentioned, FMV, broadcast, vision mixing, it's all great stuff. There's also some, what we call text adventure, incident system between hand. So it gives you a little bit of calm between the storm of these broadcasts, how hectic they are, and shows you the personal consequences on the character's story at home. But yeah, let's jump into
Let's have a little look.
Election results.
So perhaps we should all be celebrating.
Except for the rich.
I mean, a lawyer and a TV personality running the country. Seriously?
We've had worse.
What does the future look like to you?
A bleak space where we've all been figuratively sodomized into submission. Let's have a go with this whole democracy thing.
Okay.
And here we ballywell are.
Good stuff.
Brilliant!
So,
A mysterious symbol has appeared overnight. Could this be the daring first move of a silent resistance movement?
Yeah, a government, a bond, Peter Clement.
There are some pissants who just don't know how to be.
And an attempt was made to censor some of your looks.
What? Are you joking?
We're only getting started.
No disrupt. No resistance. Oh, Alex, you're going to get me in trouble with that.
Your channel is a f***ing disgrace.
I'm sorry, it's very hot. But before we all hand off our freedoms, should we ask them who we're handing them over?
please, we can't show you. Cut to the ads.
Give us a hug.
If you fire a single shot,
Initial estimates put the death toll into the millions. Mr. Blundercatch, I understand you're upset, but we can...
Jesus!
Good job, everybody!
Meal of an Eastern...
Well, if that doesn't distract you from the world outside, I don't know what will.
That's all coming up on tonight's National Nightly News.
I think I did a pretty good job of explaining our entrance.
Yeah.
Now you've seen what we do.
Brilliant. I think it's me next.
Yes. So our talk basically is how everything we've learned in the process of filming a TV show and then making a game out of it, and what not to do. And so step one, take it away, Andy.
First of all, don't book a rehearsal when you're supposed to be in Lithuania. So you have 3 of us here today, but there's actually 4 directors at NotGames. Jason Orbam, he's one of the writers, one of the directors. He does all of the music in the game. But he's very, very talented, and he is gutted that he couldn't be here. And we're gutted he couldn't be with us. We're really excited to actually be here talking to you guys. So it's a real shame that there's only 3 out of 4 of us. But He did send us a little letter, so I'm just going to read that one out, and I'm sure
Genuinely
it's lovely.
received this from him last night.
Hello, DevGAMM attendees, and hello to you, my trusted fellow directors. That's nice. While you have been away at a conference, a few more don'ts have made themselves known. All right, good. Number 1, don't borrow Den's car for a quick stunt sequence.
Yeah, I'm not liking how this is going, Andy.
Number 2, if you must borrow Den's car, don't try to leap it over Alex's car. Number 3, employ a trained stunt driver. Don't use a 19-year-old runner who reckons he's pretty good with his dad's Skoda. Number 4, don't call the lead actor the C word. It doesn't only stand for convincing. Number 5, don't rearrange the office into a vertical structure. It's very hard for the coders to reach their desks because they're inexperienced climbers.
Lovely bit of wordplay.
Oh, lovely. Number 6, don't trust other people to read your jokes. They'll fumble the timing and the pinch line will be ruined by misread worms.
Nice.
That's about it for my top tips. Have a wonderful conference, everybody. I wish I could be there. Love and best wishes to you all. Oh, P.S. Den and Al, you will need new cars. Yours, metaphorically, Jay.
Lovely.
Yeah, fuck that guy, to be honest. I'm glad he's not here.
All right. So just to give you guys a bit more context of what the hell is going on here, I thought I'd give you a very, very brief history of NotGames as a company in under 1 minute. So here we go. We worked for a theatre charity. Charity was in trouble. We made a hand-drawn parody game that was sure not to upset anybody. We went a bit viral, gave all the money to charity, changed the name of the game. We made another more ambitious hand-drawn parody game, which nobody buys. We got sad. We got real jobs. And then we realized what we were actually good at. Then we convinced TinyBuild that we were actually good at it. We accidentally broke a Guinness World Record in the process, and then we got invited to Lithuania to talk to you about it. The end. Thanks.
What a story.
Thanks. So step 2 of things not to do is don't not make FMV, obviously. So after we released our second game, we spent about a year or so licking our wounds, and we came to realize what we were actually good at. Why did our first game do well? And really, the reason was it was funny. The first game was a parody game, obviously, but there was a lot of satire. And what we realized there was that satire is all well and good, but it obviously dates really quickly. Political references, pop culture stuff, that becomes either cringeworthy or you completely forget it really, really fast. So, a production like South Park, they can get away with it because they take 7 days to make a TV show and then they put it out. So they've got a really quick turnaround. And as we all know, game dev, not so much with the quick turnaround. And also with something like South Park, you watch it in one sitting and you're done, whereas obviously players expect experiences they can come back to over a longer period of time, so that kind of up-to-date cultural stuff just doesn't fly so well. So that was out, we decided. But we wanted to make something original, so we knew we were never going to make the world's best FPS game or open world game because there's so many talented devs out there with way more experience than us. So we put our heads together and we thought, what are we actually good at? And our background...
Not a lot, Al.
Thank you, mate. But our background is as actors and comedians and filmmakers. So we thought, actually, we're probably better at that than many people in the dev community. So, FMV. And then this game came along. And this kind of did something really, really huge for the FMV genre. Obviously, it was pretty popular and kind of caused a resurgence just by that. But obviously, there's a rich history of FMV games, Night Trap, the Tex Murphy games, those old Sierra games. But there was a reputation for being kind of campy, maybe, slightly over the top, pantomime-y, maybe even gimmicky. But Sam Barlow made a really, really crucial design decision, which is diegetic video. So obviously, that's video that's actually in the world. You're not seeing kind of green screen characters in 3D environments. You're actually within the concept and premise of the game. You're watching video on a screen. And now suddenly, we're able to really find ourselves immersed and connected to the story and to the characters. And so that's the secret sauce, I believe. So that was kind of the jumping off point. We thought, we could do something that uses diegetic video in a really cool way. Dennis?
Yeah, that's where I came in with my sort of knowledge and sort of previous work history in the film industry. So whilst that game we spoke about previously didn't do too well, I was off in the film industry, working on some big Hollywood films, everything else, and just basically gaining experience on how to make video and how to be really good at it. It's something that I've done from sort of young right the way through, making my own sort of home videos, my own movies, helping out on set. So it's really nice to get a broad sort of spectrum of how to work in a really small indie environment, right up to how the AAAs just, there's a problem, we spend money, it gets solved, which is essentially how the big movies do it. But yeah, this first line here, when I read this, because I don't play a lot of video games, I'm not a massive gamer, unlike a lot of people at this conference. I'm interested in the film side. So I had to read, when these guys said, we want to do FMV, I was like, well, what the fuck is FMV? So I had to read this, and it said, it's a video game narration technique that relies upon pre-recorded video files rather than, and that's the important bit, sprites, vectors, and 3D models. Now, I don't know how to do sprites, I don't know how to do vectors, and I don't know how to do 3D models. What I do know how to do is make really good video content. So when I chatted to these guys and said, yeah, I can do some video content, let's put it in the game. And we did. But what we didn't do is respect as a genre of FMV. Ow.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, so we get asked quite a lot about, obviously these older FMV games have a huge cult following, Night Trap. We get asked all the time, are you massive fans of these classic games? And honestly, the answer is no, not really. We're aware of them, but I think that's kind of a good thing. I think that's kind of why we were able to do something a bit different and unique, was because we didn't necessarily know what the conventions were. We weren't kind of hamstrung by these boundaries because we didn't know what they were. So
almost feels a little taboo to admit that, but yeah, none of us have really played it before. We just went, we'll give it a go. Might as well see what happens.
But I know what you're thinking. Does that mean you make a load of mistakes that people have already solved?
Yes.
Stay tuned.
Oh, this was me. So don't do it on your own. As Alice said, he's giving you a brief history of what we've done before. So we made some parody games, we made a few different things with satire, comedy, and we learned what we were good at. Good at narrative, writing, the comedy aspect, as Dennis said, making video, and even vaguely making the game part. What we don't know is the video game industry. As I said, we hadn't even played FMV games before we made our FMV game. And marketing. How do you sell it to people? How do you actually get out there with your brand, with your product? So we have our skill sets, but after that, if we can go to the next one. That's us falling off a cliff as we realize that we don't know what we're doing next. When you've made the game, how do you get it into the hands of people? How do you get people interested? So that's when we decided a publisher might be the right way to go.
It would have been easier to get a stock image than me throwing you off of it, Andy, but anyway.
Well, yeah, we ran out of time. But yeah, so Tiny Build stepped in for us there. And as Al said, we convinced them we had this idea and that we could deliver on it. But we were very clear up front, we need you to sell it. We need you to tell us how it gets on Steam and Epic and all of that jazz, because we don't know what we're doing. We can only just deliver the product. And they did. And I think the other thing as well was, as you can see here, this is us with Andre, our first producer, Ivan, who's also floating around this conference. We haven't got a photo with. We meant to, and we didn't. It's classic NotGames. But the actual other side of it, as well as the marketing in the industry, was the actual game input, which I don't think we kind of appreciated when we first started, was the ideas that would come through, the support, that level of kind of help. Like, you don't really think about it when you're in the weeds of how you make that game. But all of that outside eye and be able to go, actually, boys, I like what you're doing with that, but it should be this. And us hearing, yeah, it should be that. And then we go away and we go, he was right, though. Yeah, it should absolutely be that. So there's a few of that. So I just wanted to acknowledge that actually Andre and Tiny Build and Ivan, like, without them, we wouldn't be here right now. So if you know what you suck at, find someone who can do that and get them to help you with it. That's really the big takeaway. I think I've got one more. Who knows? Let's go for one. Let's see what happens. Oh, yeah. So the other thing, of course, is there's 4 directors, and we have a few full-time staff. But when you make an FMV game on the scale of Not for Broadcast, I mean, it really adds up how many people you start working with. We worked with over 350 contractors in terms of actors, cast, crew, sound engineers, dubbing teams, etc. So I just wanted to say it wasn't all us. A lot of it was us, but it wasn't all us, as you can see here, just us working through there, building sets and everything like that. But I think the next bit's going on to you, Dan, because where do we put everyone when we got all that massive amount of people?
Just thank you for choosing that lovely picture of me doing whatever I'm doing there. Thank you, mate. That's great.
I actually genuinely believe that during that photo, Al went, hold on, I was doing nothing in the last one. Get one of me doing something.
Yeah.
Pretty sure that's how that worked. Yeah, so what we decided to do is there a pointer on here? Oh, look.
Top, yeah.
That's cool. We decided that we're not a conventional games company. We didn't want to work out of an office. We were like, do you know, it'd be much cheaper if we just rented a really big, really like cool house.
Does that go really well, Dan, for us?
Yeah,
Really
well, I was like, do you know, now you see all these influencers that buy houses and stuff. We were the first, right? We tried this. Trust me, it doesn't work. So we rented this house. And it was really cool. It was a lovely house. It had a little annex on the side here, and that's where some of us lived because we were trying to save money. And we thought that we could shoot the whole of an episode in a house.
To be fair, we did.
I mean, it is possible. It's just not advised. The problem with this beautiful house is the rest of the street. It's a private road, full of. I don't know if many of you are familiar with English private roads, full of some, we call them pricks in the UK. But yeah, they don't like young game devs turning up on their street and making video games. So when this happens, this is a van, and this is all of the lighting equipment that we load in to be able to achieve what we need to achieve for the footage. And of course, when this happens, these houses along here, they start doing this, right? And Clive, our next door neighbour, who really did not like us, started seeing all of these vans pulling up and going, yeah, no, this is not in line with the code of our street. We don't like this. Because they thought we were doing this inside the house. To control our lighting, we use Corex. It's basically like a corrugated plastic, and we put it across all of the windows, and we black everything out so that I can control the lighting in the news studio. Of course, when you do that, everyone thinks that you're making porn, because that is just the go-to thing. Now, aside from the porn we were making, we decided to shoot the game as well. And as we all know, being game developers in here, this is what was actually happening inside the house. There was us sitting around a computer, watching somebody play our game, making copious notes, and essentially sitting in silence for long periods of time. Nowhere near as interesting as the previous slide.
On Clive then, sorry for a tangent, but my favourite moment was at one point we were filming an advert about checking your prostate and prostate health. So I ordered like a scale model of the male reproductive system, and I got the old notification that said, this has been delivered to your neighbour. So I had to go around to Clive's house and be like, Clive, can I have my bum, please? And amazing.
I will say as well, I don't like defending Clive, but there was one moment, because I think it happened after that delivery, where if anyone's played the game, there is a small scene where there's a gimp. And the person playing that, I think, heard that story and insisted on standing in the one window we hadn't correxed, so that everyone could see.
Dressed in a full gimp suit.
Yeah.
Yeah, welcome to NotGames. Let me just jump back, by the way. Just notice this archway here. It might be relevant later. So another problem with shooting in a house is space. We thought it would be a great idea. Now, as you can see here, these are our coders' desks. And as you can see, there's no coders sitting at them. Now, the reason for that is we have to move our coders out of the way to be able to shoot the content for the video game. Not the most productive of methods. We're very tight on the edge of frame. I don't think you can see it. It's quite dark down here, but the edge of frame here is essentially there and there. So if we nudge the camera at all, basically we get our coders' desks in shot. Height was another problem shooting in a lovely house. As you can see, the roof here, this is all hung black fabric because the ceiling of a house does not look like the inside of a news studio. Surprise. And when you normally build a scaffolding rig inside a house, it doesn't normally work. And we found that out by having height restrictions. the archway that I mentioned earlier, you'll see it in this shot here. There we go. There's our archway. And this is our cameras on it. Bear in mind, this is the news, everybody. There's an archway in the news now, apparently. Yeah, we got away with this. We shot this in a house, and not many players have noticed the transition of moving from a house to a studio, which I suppose is compliments to us.
I'm glad we spent all that money upgrading the sets.
Yeah. But, you know, having those restrictions of shooting in a posh house, it's not a dip.
We'll run, boys. Just go.
Just jump over that. Okay. Yeah. So while we were shooting, I'm not sure if any of you have heard of this. There was a thing in the UK. It was called coronavirus. It may have spread over here. I'm not sure. But during that, we were still working. Andy, you might want to talk about that.
Yeah. Well, we were supposed to still be working. So as Dennis said, it cropped up a little while. I know we're all sick of this. I'm not going to go on too long, but obviously, as we've said already, in terms of standard video game development, we're a little different because we have to build film sets and have people do filming. That causes its own problems. We were, when the first lockdown hit, 3 days out from shooting levels 4, 5, and 6. That is, for context, about 6 hours of gameplay in terms of variants, headline photos, etc. That is 3 months of shooting, set up sets, all paid for, all booked, all ready, and probably about at least 2 months before that of pre-production. So, as you can imagine, we were a little stressed, a little unhappy that when we got to that point and went, I guess we won't be filming that then. And Al was actually even in Australia at the time. He'd gone on holiday.
Lazy.
Well, he got locked over there, so at least hopefully you enjoyed it while you were there.
Yeah, it's better than England.
But, yeah, so there was some tears, some swearing. But eventually we went, OK, what are we going to do, boys? We can't just sit here doing nothing. And we went to Tiny Build and said, OK, hear us out. We have a crazy idea where we'll still make a bonus level, but what we're going to do is ship all of the cameras, the sound equipment, the sets, the costumes, directly to the actors' houses. They'll be their own crew, they'll set themselves up, and we'll film it over Zoom, magnificent technology.
Are you on commission?
I wish. I'm aiming for it now. Yeah. But yeah, so we ended up trying to do it that way. And if we go to the next one, you can see here, this is us doing some rehearsals, getting everything set up.
We don't look stressed at all.
No, it's all very happy, don't we? I can't imagine. I was actually working with the programmer to design and do game design while these two boys and Jay were remotely directing and crewing, and I just can't imagine.
And not to forget, this is the very beginning of the pandemic, so part of the process of this is then having to, once all the equipment has been used for one scene, it gets shipped back to Dennis, and then he has to clean it, sanitize it, get everything sorted, and then ship it off to the next person. It was a whole thing.
Yeah, and during shipping wasn't easy, because along with a lot of us who were isolating, a lot of the drivers for these delivery companies were also isolating. Yeah, we got bent over by some DHL drivers for how much they were charging to ship a bit of gear.
And they only lost 2 things, didn't they?
Yeah.
They only lost 2 things, which, to be fair to them, in their response was, yeah, we're sorry, we can't do anything about it.
Really helpful.
But when we filmed this sort of lockdown special, it was really important to us very early, because again, we made the decision within 3 days of the lockdown, but we didn't want it to be about a pandemic. We thought, and rightly so, that by the time it came out, people really wouldn't want to play a game where people are in lockdown or anything. But and also obviously we weren't sure how, what the death toll would be, and obviously, it's not necessarily something to make light of, but we needed a reason for our thing to be set inside and why people are locked down. So we instead decided that it would be a set of rampaging toys that were loose in gremlin style, and so everyone is kind of sheltering in their homes from toys.
You can see here one of our iconic scenes from the lockdown level. That's one of the reporters from the news. He's put some sponges on his jacket to protect him,
PPE.
And he's in his bathroom.
We actually had to, true story, during this scene, we had to pause for 5 minutes so that his flatmate could use the bathroom to go to the toilet. That's the kind of what we were working with.
But we did it. We managed to get it all done somehow. And then at the other end, these boys did all the hard work filming it, and I got a load of video files from a load of different Zooms, all locally recorded. And if anyone's been on a Zoom call, which I'm assuming everyone has, there's a little bit of lag sometimes. Now, when you're doing comedy, timing is quite important. You can't just have someone tell a joke and then someone tell the punchline 5 seconds later. So I had to go through, sometimes frame by frame, and cut, speed up, or slow down. It was a long, laborious process. I think it's fair to say the first time you boys watched back at some of those scenes.
We got back, we spent all this time and all that process we just talked about, and then we got this load of footage with these huge cavernous pauses as someone waits to deliver a punchline, and we were so gutted that we just thought this just isn't going to work, until Andy went through, as he said, and sped them all up and morphed all the timings, and then it was great. But my God, yeah, so that's a lesson learned.
2 full days on a 6-minute sequence. But it was fine, we did it, and we got it out.
Filming remotely, difficult.
But we did do then a little bit more. So we did actually end up filming episode 2, still obviously during the pandemic, as we all know, it still kind of kept going, but people were allowed out. We took a bit more kind of safety, as we saw earlier in that clip. We were in masks, we were cleaning and everything like that. I don't want to go into too much about it, because obviously everyone's bored of the pandemic, but if you are interested, we actually filmed a pandemic. Filmed a pandemic, filmed a documentary.
Good addition, Andy. Well done.
I know. It's behind the scenes. We call it Lights, Camera, Lockdown. And it's, an hour and a half? And it just goes through us, basically the full story of coming up with the idea, pivoting, how we did it, and what we actually got through. And there's loads of cool behind-the-scenes content with talented actors and people like them. Hand over to you.
So another lesson is don't aim too high. And that, of course, means something that hopefully everyone knows is control scope. So FMV, and this is just for the whole game in general, not for this lockdown stuff. But obviously FMV is super expensive, both in terms of time and money, and then we have to make it into a game. So the whole production is super, super expensive. So really we have to be on top of scope, which we weren't very good at, to be honest.
Still not great.
Yeah, but we were really adamant that we wanted our world to feel alive, and that feeling of both being alive and being real and a big world, not just this linear, passive story, was really important, and the feeling of it actually being live. Because obviously we believe there's a risk with some FMV stuff that you feel a bit passive, that you're watching this linear, pre-recorded story. Even if you have choices to go left or go right, it still feels a little, it doesn't feel alive. But obviously, the closer you get to that dream of life, the much more expensive it gets. So we tried some smart ways of handling that. One was with the headline photo. So at the start of every broadcast, you get a choice of 2 photos for each news story. So here we have a footballer coming out of a club with a girl, or coming out of the club and being sick into the gutter. And that is a choice that you get that has real, clear, direct, immediate impact. Next time we see this character, he'll either be getting married or he'll be going to rehab. So it's much cheaper, most importantly, to make these photos than it would be to film whole scenes and to film loads and loads of FMV content. So we made sure that at the start of every level, you get very clear, very direct consequence for your choices, but in a way that was manageable and cheap. The second thing that we did is what I like to think of as the illusion of choice. Because, of course, for players, what we're actually striving for is the fact that they feel like they have a choice. You don't necessarily actually have to give them a choice. So at the start of level 2, we give them this. These are the advert tapes. So you pick your tapes that play your commercials in the advert breaks. And there's one here. I'll zoom in a little bit. There's an advert for a children's toy, and it says, should we play, is this toy safe? And then in the dialogue, we kind of get a little bit of context. Say, oh yeah, there's this children's toy that's out. It might be a bit dangerous, whatever. Now, if the player chooses to play that tape, in the future, the next level, they will learn that toy was not safe, and thousands of children were burned in horrible accidents, and a lot of people went, oh my God. So what we did there was really deliberately, very early on, gave them a very specific choice that they could make that would immediately show them the consequence. Now, what that does is it now means you're on your toes. Now, anything small could have a real massive impact on the story of the game in quite a horrific way. So that, by peppering in these little moments, players are never really sure what is being tracked. Obviously, there's faction strengths and all that kind of stuff, whether your boss likes you. We are tracking all of these things, but obviously we can't feed back directly on every single decision. But by making some really big, specific, often fun choices like this, it means that players are never really sure, and it gives you this feeling that everything you're doing is really, really important, because some of it is, but a lot of it isn't. But that was one way we handled
Similar
it.
to that illusion that we know what we're doing up here right now, essentially.
I thought I was doing quite well, Dennis. Thank you for undermining me. Now, obviously, step 8 is don't aim too low. We always like to say that we like to keep our eye on what's in front of the camera. So anything that the audience or the player is going to see, that is where we try not to compromise. And so we're trying to keep pushing ourselves higher and higher. So for us, the acting is completely paramount. And big statement here, but in my opinion, most video game acting is too big. There, I said it.
He said it, Andy. He said in the rehearsal he was going to say it, and he fucking said it.
I didn't believe it.
It's almost pantomime-ish, to be honest. And with film especially, the camera is right here. You're not sitting at the back, even compared to where you guys at the back are there. You know, when you're watching a movie, a TV show, or an FMV game, you're right up in the character's face. You can see them think. You can see their thoughts. You can see that moment that actor forgets their line as they look for their line. So it's so important. So in FMV, but I think in all games, performances should never be an afterthought. Performances are so important. They are literally communicating your story, your character, and your world to the players. So really, if you can, don't leave that.
One of the phrases we live by is put the money in front of camera, because that's what players see.
Exactly. The other thing, so this is just some acting happening, you're always going to come across in any development process problems or limitations that prevent you from reaching that perfect vision of the game that you want to make that's in your head. And that's always going to happen, and you're going to have to make, it feels like we often say it's a series of compromises, and you're trying to make the best ones. And we were resistant to a lot of them at first, as many people are, but actually we discovered in this process that sometimes going with it and having that limitation and finding a creative solution to it, actually you end up with something better than you would have done otherwise, better than that what you thought was the perfect vision of your game. Case in point, we had a scene in episode 3 where an actor wasn't available, and this was an actor that had appeared before. It was a character that existed, this pop star, and we couldn't get her. So what could we do? We had the scene, it was written, it was really funny, we were really proud of it.
We could cut the scene now.
Yeah, we could cut the scene, we could just call it quits and do something else. Or you could do this.
Brilliant solve. What a brilliant solve.
Yeah, believe it or not, a person with a paper bag with a sad face on it was never in my vision of the game. But my God, it's better now. Like, it's actually, I wrote all these what I thought were hilarious lines, but it turns out just having a different person with a bag on their head who every now and then just does this is way funnier than any line. And yeah, so I think sometimes lean full into those limitations and find a cool way, whether it's a cheaper way. And honestly, I think often you'll be surprised that it's better. Step 10, Dan.
Sorry, Dan, just before you jump in here.
Yeah,
now,
go
I'm
on.
no mathematician, boys, but I believe 9 comes between 8 and 10.
Just ignore that, Andy. Just ignore it.
All right, 9 is don't count.
I wish that was deliberate, actually.
Yes, as Al's explained throughout the game, basically for us to achieve what we need to achieve, there's 4 cameras on that left-hand side and 2 main cameras on the right-hand side, which is your program and your preview, essentially, like what's coming out. And we have to shoot everything on those 4 cameras constantly. Even if it's not going to be shown out on the news, we have to have a live feed coming in so it looks like there is that option to cut to that camera. And what that leads to is us having to shoot everything in one take. Now, for the film industry, this is not something new. The first real use of creative cutting to create that single continuous take, Alfred Hitchcock did it in his movie Rope. And essentially what that means is using an actor or a piece of furniture to pan the camera across, and as it crosses that piece of furniture, it fills the screen so you have a cut point and then you can retake and follow through. And it's a creative way of making lots of shots look like one continuous shot. You'll probably know these references better now. In Birdman and 1917, they have done it more recently. Now, in the case of this film, holy shit, did they spend a lot of money to achieve that. Now, they had rigs on rigs on rigs. They had handheld cameras that were being tracked, and then as they handed them off, they were being connected to a car that had a rig connected to it that then carried on the camera movement, that then got moved up onto a platform, that then got raised up, that then they did a smooth transition, then they were in a helicopter. I mean, these guys, they did it properly. We don't have that budget, unfortunately. However much we've asked Alex for that budget, we don't have that. So we, again, had to do it the cheap way. Now, the cheap way is to just shoot it in one take. Using our theatre background, we're used to doing Edinburgh shows where everything is like a single continuous take. We basically just did loads of little plays, didn't we? And a lot of that fell down to these boys, especially this guy here. What a handsome lad.
For those of you
he used to have a lot longer hair, that's why.
Yeah, so these guys are for part of the show. These are the camera operators. Now, part of the interesting thing of an FMV game is the crew are a really crucial part of the content, because although the actors have to get everything right, I'm giving instructions to my crew because they have exact points that they need to hit, exact things that they need to show along the way. So they're almost learning a dance routine, which for us, I mean, we could be a Britney Spears backing dancers right there, but we're not familiar with that style of having to move. Most of these guys come from the traditional film background, which is the same as me, which is we'll set up, we'll light it beautifully, and then we'll swing the cameras around, we'll reset the lights, we'll take 3 hours, and then we'll shoot it again. We don't have that luxury. Lighting. One single continuous take with 4 cameras, all pointing at different angles and different things. You have to light for every scenario, and you have to light essentially on the fly if you're going to be creative about it. So you get that feeling of it looking a bit flat in the video game, and that is because we don't have the luxury of, you know, backlighting this character and uplighting here and bouncing some light off of here, because that bounce board's going to be in a shot, so we can't have it there. So lighting becomes really, really tricky in doing it this single continuous take way. And for the future, we have spoken about using those creative cuts and how we can use that to make our lives easier and not do it the cheap and horrible way.
So step 11 is don't expect anyone to understand what you're doing. So the problem that we have faced is that we're kind of, as we've said, doing 2 very separate things. We're making a TV show and we're making a game. Now, those 2 teams of people have no idea what the other people do. They have no idea. Even to this day, we've been working on this game for 3 years. We've released 3 episodes of it. A lot of the lead actors have never played it, never seen it. They're not gamers. A lot of actors are not gamers. So for us, as the team working on both, it's so important that we have to be thinking on both those levels at the same time. So we need to make sure that lots of actors would prefer not to shoot everything in one take. They'd like to be able to get their lines wrong and not have to go back and do it all again. So it's really important to try as much as possible to get everyone on a level to understand, okay, this actually has to be this way for a game mechanic. So in the game, you can censor bad language. And so those swear words, where they're placed, how they're emphasized, are direct call-outs to the player. You need to do something right now. And so it's making sure whilst you're watching that, not only are you shooting something beautiful, that's well lit, that looks great, your work's not done there. You want to make sure you're not making trouble for yourself in the future when you actually come to turn it into a game. So it really does require that ability. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, hello. Episodic. Yeah, doing all this, we decided that we needed to release this episodically. Now, what that means is you guys will be familiar with the early access process. You can take a game, you set it out to loads of people, they play it, they give you loads of feedback, you change it, and you keep changing it, and you keep changing it until you get to the point where you go, 1.0, we're ready to go. For us to do that, it involves going back and reshooting everything, because most of the content in the game is video. So we can't go back and just change if a player says, "Oh, I didn't like the way that camera moved from here to here," live with it, because we don't have the money and the resources to every time go back and reshoot everything. So we had to go episodic. And what that did achieve was allowed us to, although we couldn't change the video content from episode to episode, what it did do for these guys in the writing room is it allowed them the freedom to not have to have the story in one hit, but to have the feedback from players for characters that they see on the screen and go, "This guy's hilarious," and we go, "Brilliant, we're putting him in the next bit." And for us to learn what people enjoyed about the game, and then we can adapt it for the future episodes. But in terms of video content, it's a really horrible way to work, and a really pressurized, we basically have been releasing 1.0s every 6 to 9 months for about 3 years. And the stress and the build up to a launch, as some of you may know, is really it's a horrible time, because you're panicking if everything's going to be okay. That's why you see 3 pretty broken men up here and one that didn't even make it. It's because it's a really stressful period having to do that a lot. So for the future, and Herb will talk, the episodic sort of motion is something that we'd maybe potentially stay away with next time. Because this happens. Because we end up phoning this guy and going, "Alex, we need more money. We need to do this, we need to do this." And Alex doesn't like spending too much money.
Which is his job, to be fair. We're not anti that.
There's nowhere to dig. I love the man to bits, and he has given us money to do our jobs. That's a good start, isn't it? Have a dig at our CEO. Well done. Don't develop a game about making a TV that tries to stop people making TV. Andy, you might want to talk about this.
Yeah,
mate.
I'll jump into this one. Just as a quick one there as well. When we actually first spoke to Alex, he must have known we were the creatives. And what I mean by that is we clearly hadn't appreciated all of the work and things that were going, because we thought we'll film it in rough, right? Yeah. That's our early access plan. And then we'll go back and we'll reshoot and refilm it all properly. No way do we get to do that, and how expensive that was. We did the first episode and he just went, "Yeah, boys, that was great. You don't need to do it again." And we went, "Oh, okay, I guess we're just sticking with it." But anyway, so very important point. Don't make a game. We're making a game that making TV shows, that's what people love. That was the USP. That's what we learned from early access. That's what people enjoy doing.
It took us a surprisingly long time to realize this, what seems like a very simple point. So make sure you know what people like about your game, and don't try and make them do stuff they don't want to do. Yeah.
Don't take them away from the thing that they like. We started with a few different things. This is not Flappy Bird, some of you will be surprised to know. That is actually one of our game mechanics, which was interference, right? Actually a fairly important part of our game in terms of the narrative and what we did in it. But when we started, this is kind of emblematic of what we thought the game was going to be, which is much more in line with spinning plates. We thought it was going to be, you have to mix this hectic broadcast, deal with the swear words, load the adverts, but also deal with interference and every other extra mechanic that we add in. And the fun would be surviving to the end, effectively, and making a good broadcast with all of that going on. And let's say, once we did the first 3 levels and went into early access, what we got was, no, we really like the TV, we like the narrative, we like the filming, but can we focus on that? Can we do more of that and less of everything else? So this is, as I say, one of these was, okay, we'll take this out so it's less kind of distracting and more in keeping with the game world. So then you can now have to match a waveform, which it looks prettier and it's just much, much better to go in. What we also learned from episode 2, as I say, I've touched on it a little bit already, is that distracting players with mechanics that aren't core to the main loop, which is really, as I say, making TV, doing the censoring, vision mixing, all of that, and then being able to watch back their broadcast at the end, making that TV show that they feel is theirs, that personalized thing. See this here? This is what we talked about earlier, little snuggle hugs. That's the little robot toys we did in the robot level. They jump up, and the player has to knock them back, right? And if you don't, it's going to change the channel for you, or start pressing the censor button, or on the right-hand side or the left-hand side, it's going to turn off your power or start jumping on the phone just to be really annoying. But what that means is the player has to actively turn away from the screens to use that mechanic. And that was the big thing that we learned for episode 3, was actually people like challenge, they like the upping of the ante, they like upping of the stakes, but let's keep them where they need to be, which is focused on these screens, focused on the story that we're telling and going through. And we actually, in the end, we released a fairly big accessibility update, and what we did in that was gave the players all the ability to turn off any mechanics they didn't like. Right? We still recommend, obviously, they play through on the main story in terms of, because that's how we've designed it, and some of the experiences are very narrative-driven as well, like the electric shocks in level 3. But they now have the ability, if that doesn't work for them or it's causing problems, to actually turn it off and play it so that at the end of the day, we want people to enjoy our game, right? And if that means that they don't want to play anything but just Vision Mix, at the end of the day, they gave us the money and we've made it and we can give them that. Why not? Let's keep them focused on what is important and what we're actually making.
So at the end of the day, the things that we learned were either don't give up.
Even
Loads
when
of people
hard.
told us that it couldn't be done, that it shouldn't be done. But halfway through, they were telling us, why are you doing this? Or obviously, step 15, do give up, but way before you've spent all your money, your life, and many years off the end of your life doing it.
Importantly, this is, I would say, our 7th or 8th project. So there's 2 we released before. There's, 4 or 5 that we've worked on and just went, nah, this hasn't got legs. It's not going to work through. So you've got to either keep going
or don't.
or just know when to quit.
And the perfect way to exemplify this, well, just before we signed with TinyBuild, Alex Nichaporchik said to us in this great quote, "It's either never been done before, either because it can't be done, or because it hasn't been done right." And this entire process for us has been learning why it either can't be done or so far hasn't been done right. And finally, don't pass up a chance to self-promote. Not for Broadcast is available on Steam and all good
Feel
platforms.
free to go buy it.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Any
that's
questions?
us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys for this energetic talk, and thank you for being brave enough to give a first talk after the official party. So this is a time for questions from the audience. Do we just raise a hand if you have one? Yeah.
Hi. So what's your favorite story from the game? The one you personally like, maybe like from one character or... So yeah, something that touched you specifically, one of the stories.
Great question.
For me, obviously coming from the filmmaking side, in terms of enjoyment in making the sequence, I'm trying to not ruin it for players that are going to potentially, because you are going to play this game, right? Cool. We have a sequence where a big thing goes off, and you saw a screenshot from it earlier.
I was going to say that.
And there's kind of like smoke and haze, and essentially we had tons of extras. We had it was the biggest shoot that we have done, and logistically, in the game, the player has to cut between showing the government in a good light and a bad light, or a bad light, and each camera, depending on which camera is on them, it can show the Prime Minister being caring and looking after somebody, or it can show her security services doing some really horrible things. And logistically, from a camera perspective, because those cameras change as well, so it's not just this is the good camera, this is the bad camera, it's this starts as the good camera, then goes to the bad camera, then comes back to the good camera. And that dance of being able to have those cameras, A, not see each other, be in the middle of absolute chaos, and picking up these perfect moments, and it looking filmic and really cool, and we had smoke, and we had guns, and we had an armor, and just that whole shoot was, for me, was probably my favourite sequence to shoot, and what it looks like in the game.
Yeah, what he said, yeah, that's put it really well. Yeah,
I'm
that's
going to be
the
different.
best we've ever done.
I agree, technically, that was one of the biggest stretches we've done. I think in terms of just the fun of the day and the laughs, the red carpet sequences, which...
So like the one we saw with the bag on the head, that was
with
one
the bag
of
on
those.
the head, and it basically was a way to play off a lot of the players' choices up to that point. So how have they portrayed certain celebrities? Have they been pro-advance, or have they kind of sabotaged them in any way? And then you get them on the red carpet giving these interviews, and I think the reward of that, and some of them are so funny. We have some really good actors.
And I think actually from a design point of view, that was one of the smartest things we did, because the way we did that was, it's very modular scene. So rather than having these big FMV scenes that are kind of linear, really, because of these huge events. That we tracked a load of things that the player did throughout the game, and then in those scenes you just get little interviews that kind of feed back stuff that you've done, like, oh, you pissed off this person, that person's dead now, so they're just a jar of ashes or whatever. So that very quick, cheap way of, at the end of the game, giving you a really unique ending because it's constructed of tiny little moments. And yeah, I'm very proud of that as well.
Fairly sure that it drove George mad, though, because from a programming point of view, up to that point, it had all been one set of videos between ad breaks, and then we went, George, could we do like 6 that you can just cut between randomly based on some decisions? And yeah, he had a small breakdown, but we got there in the end. That's the important part.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi guys, thanks a lot for the talk. I wanted to ask you, how did you approach the writing for the game? Because it's like a significant part of it, and you talked about many things but the writing. And since it's unlinear, is it possible to have the story written before the shoot, as it usually happens in the film industry? Or in this kind of production, like, okay, when you do the first step and then we figure out where we do next because now we discover something, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, no, the plan was to have it completely written. So we write it more like a film, to be honest. We write it like a film script. We spent a lot of time with huge whiteboards with timelines of exactly what's happening in the world, what's happening in the news story, and we created the sort of the arc of the world. And then yeah, we write it just like a film script. But the joy of going episodic or early access was that we, as we kind of touched on, were able to make decisions at different points in the story. So we actually made quite huge changes in the end. Characters that were only supposed to come for one scene, actually people connected with them, and also we did. Like sometimes we'd hire an actor who we didn't know, and they'd give such an amazing performance and bring life to what was just kind of a background character. So suddenly they'd have we'd write them in more, and the story would kind of follow that, which was nice. So that was definitely a benefit of going early access.
Yeah, something to do, like these guys, I'm not involved in the writing process, but these guys work really hard to create writing that a lot of people, it feels like it's being ad-libbed and sort of impromptu acting, yeah, like improvised on the spot. But there's a lot of time and structure goes into writing like that. It's almost like that mockumentary style where it feels like it's a documentary, but it's very closely scripted.
One of my favourite Steam reviews ever was a really negative one about how terrible it is. And it's like, oh, it's just they're all just making it up. There's no script whatsoever. And I was like, yes, thanks.
But there is a little bit of scope for ad-libbing on the day, but we have to be very careful because this is set in a very nondescript world. So when an actor...
That wasn't problematic at all.
Yeah, so if an actor ad-libs with a real-life reference, we have to cut and go again.
We had an actor that was playing like a rap star, and he's supposed to get really leery with the government, and at one moment he literally stood up and went, "Fuck the government, fuck Boris!" And we're like, unfortunately, I agree with you, but unfortunately we can't keep that in the game.
The only other thing as well is because, as you've said, it's kind of more like a film script, but you also have to bear in mind, it's things like with the cameras, because it's all in one take. I mean, we did a prototype before making the main game. One thing, the key examples from that was, you can't have someone walk off camera and then swear. You need to have a visual cue for the player to know that, because otherwise it makes it so much harder, and this was before we had the waveform anyway, but it's basically you do the first pass and then you go through, okay, but who's actually going to be on one of these 4 cameras? Do we have good footage?
What is the player doing? What is the player doing at every moment? So you have to then go through the scene and say, okay, the player's actually going to be distracted listening to a tutorial audio here or doing this mechanic. So actually we need to make sure there's no important information here. So that's also part of it, is making sure where you're giving your story and your exposition can't be in those moments when we know they're not really going to be paying attention. Yeah, thank you.
On the production side, was it just a whiteboard where you've written the whole story and you were usually checking this, or use some software which help you to keep track things?
We started off with a literal whiteboard, and then we had the old classic cork board with the, like
murder board, wasn't it?
Analog Trello board. But then it's just become a sea of different. It's actually a Google Sheet now, just a spreadsheet. Since we started this game, we're now using Jira to kind of do all that stuff. But
we've been opened up to a world of documentation and process, and people kind of just going, "What are you doing? Like, why have you got post-it notes all over that wall? Why is this not?" So we're still learning, you know, and what we're doing here is something that we stumbled over a world record, but we've also stumbled over a completely different style of FMV, and there's no one we can go to go, "How do we do this?" Because there's people coming to us going, "How the fuck did you do that?" Like, we are the people that are doing this. So we're in this we're still learning. And, you know, and we're willing to still learn because there's lots of stuff we don't know how to do.
One more question. Have you had any problems with the actors who didn't understand what they're participating in? Because for them it's important to be part of their portfolio, and then they're like, they cannot tell to anyone what the movie is that, so like, why get it involved?
And another thing that we didn't even foresee is that the way the video exists in the game is not like a movie. You know, the sound is separate. It's obviously in different formats depending on the resolution, because we don't want to be putting these massive high-res videos that are never going to be big on the screen into the game. So then at the end of this, we get loads of requests from the actors saying, "Yeah, we want to put this in my portfolio. Can you send it?" Like, not really. Like, it doesn't. For a start, we don't edit it. That's the kind of the player's job. So we just have these huge amounts of video, and they're all converted into formats, and it is difficult.
I think the time frame isn't appreciated as well, kind of as you said there. Like, in a normal thing, it would be fairly easy, but because we kind of film it and then we go off, and then sound, for example, is all done by a guy we have on retainer, but it's all external. So he then masters it and gives it our first draft. Then we add the Foley and stuff like that, and that could take months to get through this episode.
I'm sensing a side business in editing show reels for people. That's a nice idea. Maybe let's talk. The actors, most actors, when they turn up on the day, and we say to them, "Yeah, we shoot this single continuous take," they kind of go, "Oh, really? Oh, so it's not like..." Because they're anticipating film single, like I spoke about, with, "Oh, we can cut there, we can do this." So that's the only time we have that hesitation from actors.
The most important thing is to keep the atmosphere good. Like, actors, you know, as I was a professional actor before I got into game dev, so I can say this. Yeah, we're fragile souls. We need to be looked after and told how amazing we are all the time. So yeah, that's managing.
You're doing a really good job, Al.
Well, you're amazing, man.
Thanks, boys. That is really important. Keeping the morale and spending the time, and not just expecting them to be able to walk up and just work and go home like the rest of us. But they need to.
And I think that, we made a slide out of it, right? Make sure everyone knows exactly what you're doing, because we didn't do that at the beginning, and now we're much better at kind of going, "Okay, this isn't a TV show. You won't be able to do one line, and then we'll cut, and then we'll do it."
It's much easier now because we have a game that exists that they can see. We can show them, even if they won't play it, we can show them a YouTube, and it's going to look like this, and that is a much better. Whereas when it was just this weird idea we had in our heads when we filmed the first episode, that was kind of impossible, because even sitting down trying to explain it doesn't really make any sense. So yeah, having something to show people that they can understand what they need to do.
We set the mood on set as well amongst everybody, the makeup, the crew, everybody. So if we're shooting a scene where we have a gimp coming out of a cupboard, the mood is really light and we all laugh, and we try and keep it really cheerful. But there are moments in the game where we hit, like, bang, you hit a brick wall of fucking emotion, and it's like... And to get that tension on set, we make sure that everybody across, from the crew, the this to that, because the actors need to get into that mindset, and because, as Al mentioned, the camera doesn't lie, it's right there. I don't want my crew dicking around in the background while the actors are trying to get into this focus of... So we like to create for someone from the outside coming in, we'll walk on and go, "Oh my God, this is so depressing." But we like to create that tension so that the performance is brilliant. And as soon as we call cut and we've got it, boom, the mood's back up and it's great. But creating that mood is really important for us, and we like to have that conversation beforehand.
People will do a lot for you if you're nice to them.
There was a morning when you didn't offer catering.
Yeah, exactly.
Put them in the box.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for all your questions. Thank you for this talk.